Good morning. This is week 2, the e-commerce intro video. It's for CIT 253. It's a 3-credit hour course for data-driven web pages. And as always, I'm Charles William Marshall, and that's my address and telephone number. All your assignments and so forth are on Blackboard, but there is a supporting website, cwmclass.com. Alright, so before we start talking about e-commerce, let's talk about just the objectives of commerce itself. A transaction between a provider and a consumer. It must provide a good or a service to a customer. Both parties need to feel they received good value from the transaction, or it really was not a success, and it will probably not have an interchange between those two again. Okay, so we want to design a functional e-commerce supporting database. But before we do that, we need to think about its design, not implement. There's no chance that you can write a full website that competes with Amazon.com. The goal of this course is for you to understand how to design the ERD for an e-commerce site, and then to learn the techniques to do a data-driven website. In any commerce, the customer is king, or queen, depending on the gender of the customer. No transaction happens without a customer. No customer wakes up in the morning and thinks, okay, today I want to give some of my resources away. In fact, every day when they wake up, they have resources that they are willing to spend to get resources. Let's think about the small brick and mortar stores of yesteryear. I don't know, 1950s, before the big box and malls. They knew their customers by interacting with them socially. They offered goods and services they believed the customers want to spend resources to acquire, and they based that on what they knew from dealing with them socially. They realized they needed to educate the customer on the value of their good and or the services they provided. They accepted a commitment by a customer to deliver resources in exchange for a defined good or service. And I keep saying good or services because barter is commerce. So maybe I'm going to agree to, I'll wash your laundry if you'll cook my dinner tonight. Deliver that defined good or service to the customer, and then receive the agreed upon resource from the customer to pay for the good or service. And continue to learn about what the customer wants and needs by analyzing this interaction with the customer. Did they buy coffee when they came into the store today? Well, maybe I ought to stock coffee going forward. Okay, we talk about commerce. Commerce requires sales. And one method, it's taught by salespeople, uses an FAB mnemonic. F stands for features. Okay, the lawnmower is 36 inches wide. If you look at a catalog, it will probably just say the lawnmower is 36 inches wide. It's easy to measure, but so what? Well, the advantage is it works well in small spaces. And you've moved a step up in trying to close a sale, and close a sale means that the customers agree that they want that value at that price. When you can tell them the advantage to having a 36-inch lawnmower. But when you really start to close is when you give them the benefit. If you have a 36-inch wide lawnmower, you can finish mowing sooner so that you can go to the beach, go to the symphony, whatever. And that's part of sales is you have to know what the person wants to do when they finish mowing, or you can't personalize the benefit into something they really want. Okay, if you look at sales training, there's basically two classes of people that sales pitches are designed for. You have the people who are fear of loss. And so if you're a barker at the state fair and selling step ladders, you say, now buy now because this offer will never happen again. At the end of the fair, we're going to move on and you'll never be able to get this. And you hope that they will buy because they're afraid they're going to lose this great opportunity to buy a step ladder. Or the car insurance salesman says, buy the insurance to prevent the loss due to a wreck. You might have a wreck, and wouldn't that be terrible to lose this nice car? Just send me some money every month and you won't have to worry about that loss. Or you can say, buy this reducer because its gear efficiency will save you money over its lifetime. And so if you don't want to waste all that money and lose that money into inefficiencies of your gear reducer, you need to buy our gear reducer. All those are pitched in somebody who's trying to not lose something. There's another group of people who are looking for gain. They're not really worried about losses, they're worried about gain. And one of the things you find out is, as economic times are better and better, people become more aggressive and go toward looking for the gain. In hard times, when things are tight, people are more concerned about keeping, they're not trying to get any big gain, they just don't want to have any big losses they can't afford. So, if I'm selling a ladder at the fair and I know that you are looking for a gain, that's what motivates you. I'm going to say buy now because, okay, I didn't spell you right, you can be the first in your area with this ladder. Or I can, if I'm car insurance salesperson, I'll say buy the insurance to allow you to bid on more work, because some places require that you have proof of insurance before you can haul passengers or whatever. And if I'm selling a reducer, I'll say buy this reducer because its reliability will let you produce more product. It's the same reducer, it's the same insurance, it's the same ladder at the state fair. It's simply of the salesman or salesperson trying to understand what motivates you, whether you're more interested in gaining something or preventing loss. And based on that, they will approach the sale accordingly. Okay. Another thing as you talk about commerce you need to do is sell value, not price. If your claim to fame is you've got the cheapest widget on the street, you're at risk of a competitor who figures out a way to make it cheaper. And if you understand what the customer values and deliver it, then you have a better chance of getting recurring business, because if you find out that they really are interested in that 36-inch lawnmower having wheels that are easy to push, that bearing in that wheel may cost a little bit more, but if you can demonstrate the benefit of having that bearing in that wheel to the customer, that removes you from the guy who's selling the cheapest lawnmower known to man. Okay. And I would ask that you never say something you're selling is cheap. It may be inexpensive. You ought to describe it as a great value and explain why the bearings make it a good value or whatever. Something can be a Lamborghini can be a great value if the things that you value are high speed and curb appeal on the Riviera, the French Riviera. So to talk about great value, you first have to go back and find out what it is the customer wants. Okay, why are we having this discussion? E-commerce is just another way for the buyers and sellers to conduct transactions. So before we can start doing e-commerce, we need to be sure that we're all on the same page about just commerce. So first you got to decide what good and or service you will offer. Then you need to figure out how the site will help customers appreciate the value of the good or service on offer. And decide what role the site will play. There are sites which have no intention of ever taking an order. They simply want to help you choose a product and then go to some sort of establishment and close the sale. I'll grant you that as time goes on, things are moving more and more to online, so that you can now buy cars on the computer, and 10 years ago nobody would have thought that would happen. But the first time that you develop an e-commerce site, it may be just simply a way to help people understand what you have and qualify them before you turn a salesperson loose on them. Will the site close the sale? And is it going to accept orders? Doesn't have to, but if it's going to, you need to, even if it's going to do it over the horizon at some point, you need to think about that as you start the design. What role is the site going to play in fulfilling the customer orders? Even after they place an order, do you want them, if I order a pizza from Pizza Hut, do I want the site to be able to tell me or tell my customer how the pizza's been made, the pizza's now in the oven, the pizza's out of the oven? What all do we want the customer to be able to see after the order's placed? Okay. Will it be collecting payments for goods and services, or is it anticipated that even though I bought the car on site, I'll have to go to the dealership to pick it up, and so I will pay some human there, or maybe not? How will the site learn from each transaction, so that just as the person running the small bricks and mortar store learned of his or her customers, the site will learn and be better positioned to meet future customer needs? Okay, now we can start doing the ERD, the Enterprise Relation Diagram. But before we do that, let's talk about the goal of an e-commerce site is to get the customer to complete a transaction that benefits both parties. Again, if you don't do a transaction that benefits both parties, unless you are prepared to move every day, you will not take long before you run out of customers. And the truth is, with modern communications, even people who are prepared to move will get caught pretty quickly if they're scamming folks. So there are many sites on the web that suggest database schemas. And here's 3, and I'm not going to read them to you, but you can get a copy of this PowerPoint and check them out. But the point is, we're going to talk about things to think about, and it's like an art form. There is not one right answer. Many people can try to do the same exact type of e-commerce site and get that many different variations, and then when you start talking about, well, we're going to sell cars, and we're going to sell wedding dresses, and we're going to sell cakes, and we're going to sell groceries, there is no one right answer. All 3 agree that there are 3 basic entities that the database should have, though. They all agree that you're going to need to track users, you're going to need to track product, and you're going to need to track orders. Okay, but the question is, do we agree? If a customer is king or queen, then I think we've agreed that we've got to store customer information. We need to tell a customer about our goods and services, and if we're going to do that, we got to have info on products. And if we ever want to take an order, we're going to have order information to allow us to remember what the customer is committed to purchase. So I at least agree that we need customers, we need products, and we need orders. Okay, let's talk about the customer, sometimes called user. The fundamental foundational information is you need their name. You need a password to be sure that they are who they say they are, an email address. You can create a user to save their information so that you can keep track of their purchases and payment options. The things to consider is, if you've got all this information on a customer, what has value to bad actors? Because sadly there are people out there who will try to drill your website and drain it so that they can do bad things to your customers. And a customer is a terrible thing to abuse. Passwords allow anyone who has it the keys to the kingdom. So if I know somebody's password, I can do anything they can do and commit all the resources that they can commit. Which brings us to, don't ever, say ever 30 times, store a plain text password. And also, don't encrypt it and store it. It should be hashed. Hashing is a one-way function in which the hashed value cannot be reversed to obtain the original input value, i.e. you can't get back to the password. So you say, well, what happens if somebody loses their password? How will I give it to them again? You won't. What you will do is send them a link so that they can enter a new password once you're convinced that they are who they say they are, and probably it will be to their email address, but there's other ways to authenticate. But the point is, if you have no possible way to know what their password is, that one makes sure that other people can't steal it. It makes sure that should you ever have a bad actor gain access to your database either from the outside or the inside, they can't do anything with it, and it removes the liability from you potentially in the future. Okay, symmetric encryption is based on the use of an encrypted key and is reversible operation. Anybody that's got the key can decrypt and encrypt the value to obtain the original value. We don't want to do that. How does an application authenticate using a password hash? The application receives a username and a password from the user. It performs a hashing operation on the password and compares the resulting hash value with the password hash stored in the database for the particular user. So when the user first loads his password, he's going to enter a password into a screen which nobody can see. The screen's going to immediately store that hashed value. Anytime in the future that somebody wants to get in, they'll have to key in a password. We'll then go through the hash process again. If the person trying to get in knows the original password, we'll end up with the same hashed value and they're good to go. Otherwise, they're not. Okay, speed and iterative hashing algorithms. It's a bit counterintuitive, but the older hashing algorithms went too fast. So an attacker could stand on the outside and use brute force to beat it to death and finally get in. A hashing algorithm should perform multiple iterations. This introduces a minor delay for a single hashing operation, but a small delay becomes massive if the attacker is performing a brute force attack. Consequently, the iterative hashing algorithm makes brute force attacks unrealistic, since they would require hundreds of years or more to complete. And the other side is that I'm not sure anything's impossible, but we're trying to make it where there's easier ways for bad people to make money than to try to beat your hash apart. That URL at the bottom of the page is a complete write-up about using hashing. Okay, there's an important warning. I don't care if you have had cryptography course in university. Don't try to write your own crypto. The problem of storing the passwords has already been solved. Why reinvent the wheel? You've got other things that you can use. And there are some links to places that you can get, and it's described in that URL at the bottom of the page. Okay, so things to consider about customer users. The email address. If somebody gets hold of an email address, it allows bad actors to spam your customer. Even said that, I would still store them in the open because you need the ability to send email to these folks, and if you encrypt it, you can't decrypt it to get to it. Well, I guess you could decrypt it, but I'll leave that up to you. But an email address is a portal for people to get spammed, and if people find out that Well, I only gave that email address to your site, and now I'm getting spam from there. You will get a bad reputation, and they may not want to do business with you. Name and other information assists identity theft. So all of these can be encrypted, and it's something you've got to decide what's the risk and what's the gain. And like I say, it's a risk reward for any piece of information that you store on a customer. Many computers are now encrypting the whole hard drive. So your mileage may vary, and you should consider the risks and the rewards. Okay, what address are you going to store on the customer? Is it going to be the physical address where they wake up in the morning? Is it going to be the address where they work? Is it going to be a billing address? And if so, how many? Are they going to have 5 different credit cards? One for their mama's credit card, one for their dad's credit card, one for theirs, one for their wives, one for their kids? If so, how are you going to store those multiple billing addresses and remember which one is which? Okay, are you going to allow ship to addresses so that, a simplistic site might always ship to the physical address that they entered at the start, but you won't get very far into business before somebody will want to ship one to their to another address, either because it's a gift or there's many business reasons. Okay. Another decision you've got to make about customers is, do you want to have a locked garden? A locked garden is where you can't do anything until you log in. The advantage is, each time a user calls up a web page. You can generate leads for follow-ups and identify what they did on a web page. It's equivalent to a store where you go into and the sales clerk is always on your shoulder. I'm not sure about you, but I like the ability to go in the store and browse a little bit. The disadvantages of having a locked garden is that you may run off customers with good potential. Like I say, I don't like going in stores where I can't browse, but they always are going to stand at my shoulder. And many customers are like that. If they have to log into a website, they won't. You can't personalize a message if you don't know who the user is. I believe that the right answer is to make your garden so enticing that people want to log in. Much like you could go to an old bricks and mortar store and they might have a cookie at the front counter when you identified yourself, or if you signed up in the guest register, they would send you bulletins and give you discounts like at Kroger's or whatever, or the weekly shoppers and so forth. So you can do the same sort of things with websites, but it's something you need to think about. And you can get into religious arguments about, well, I wouldn't let anybody onto my website that I didn't know. And I tend to take the other approach, which is if your website, for example, I've written websites where all they could do is pick my proprietary product. So how bad can it be if somebody's picking my product? So I tended not to have enforced locked gardens, but lots of times people didn't agree with that. Okay, so we said we were going to talk about product. How do you organize your goods and services so that it's easy for customers to find the best solutions? And be cautious and aware that even though you spend 40 hours a week or more thinking about your product, you're trying to do business with people who really don't care about your product. I used to sell gearboxes, and I spent 25 years trying to think about every little else besides gearboxes for 40 hours a week. But I was selling to people who really didn't care about gearboxes. They wanted to ship beer, or they were making beef, or they were, doing multitudes of things with the big factory. And someplace out in there was a bunch of gearboxes. But the best they could hope for was that they didn't have to think about gearboxes. And so when you organize your product, you need to make it so that somebody who's not a specialist in your field can understand the features, advantages, and benefits of what you have to offer. Okay, you need to clearly demonstrate their value to the customer. You need to upsell. Okay, So product, goods, and services, you need at minimum a few important pieces, such as what do you call the product or the service? What's the description of number 2 board, or TD27OFK56? Well, what does that mean? What does it cost? And there's other information you will probably need. If you order one, do you get a box of 50 or do you get one? What's the unit of measure? What's the package size? How big is this thing going to be, and what's it going to weigh? What are its dimensions? And the list goes on forever. And it will differ based on what product. But it's something you need to think about when you're trying to figure out your data. Okay, the site should be easy for customers to find the best solution. I hate going to a cluttered showroom in a bricks and mortar store, and the thing that comes to mind is the front store in front of a Cracker Barrel restaurant. I mean, I don't see how anybody finds anything. There's little aisles with stuff piled up everywhere, and I guess some people like that. It must work for Cracker Barrel, but don't make your website a place where you can go in and die by clicks, where it takes 50 zillion clicks to find what you're looking for. Try to figure out how you can understand what the customer is looking for and lead them quickly to your solution. And you're going to help do that by how you organize your data. You want to clearly demonstrate the product's value to the customer. What information will be needed to help the customer grasp the benefit, not the feature, so that they really understand the value that they're going to get for the money that they're prepared to spend, or you're asking them to spend. Can you devise a way for customers to help you better know the benefits they desire? Are these people looking to prevent loss, or are they more aggressive and looking to how can they get advantages? It may be hard to believe, but in fact, just as we showed with the step ladder at the state fair, there's a cohort of the customer base that will only respond to the fear of loss, and there's another cohort that don't care about loss, but if they think that they can get an advantage, they will take risk. Okay, support the upsell. What is upsell? It's like McDonald's asking for the fries when you go in and order a hamburger. An example is if somebody wants to buy a printer, do they need an extra toner cartridge? Do they need a ream of good quality paper? Do they need a support contract? If you're clever with how you organize your data, your site can ask them these questions. If you're not, it'll never get that extra toner cartridge sale. And how will you organize your data to support that? And that's not something you're going to answer in 5 seconds. And how will you remember if a customer keeps looking at a good or service? That may be an indication that there's something they don't understand, or that you ought to reach out and ask them how you can help. So how are you going to organize your site to keep up with that? And then we're going to hopefully have orders, because orders are what make the world go round. Are you going to support shopping carts, i.e. the ability to have multiple orders open for a customer at the same time? The main foundation pieces of the order are a user ID, so you know what user the person is, a product ID, so you know what customer they want, which is going to be a foreign key, and the quantity they want of the product. And there's lots of other stuff, the extended value of the product, because amazing, in many cases, not all customers pay the same price. Maybe it's got a volume discount. Maybe there's a special that they had because they did something last season. Maybe you're running a sale for this week. So what value did they pay per unit, and what's the extended value? And there's much more. Order complexity. Are we going to let each order have multiple lines? Lots of them would like to have that, but maybe you don't need it if you're selling something like automobiles, where there's not much chance that people are going to buy 2 or 3 different kinds of automobiles at the same time. Are we going to allow multiple shipments on an order? Are we going to ship from multiple locations? Are we going to drop ship to third party as your customer? At Stover, we had people, distributors, who would sell our gearbox on to, and we had OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, who would sell our gearbox, and we would build it and ship it directly to their customer, and they wanted the shipping documents to reflect that our customer shipped it, not that they shipped it. And, you need to decide going in how you want to structure that, or maybe not structured originally, but know, hey, if I ever had to do that, here's how I would. And there's many things else. Okay. And which leads us kind of to the end of the e-commerce and gets us to talking about the class project. You need to start thinking about it now. It's not something you're going to get up some morning and say, or at least if you're like me, oh, I'm going to do this and here's exactly how it's going to be. I tend on these big things to look at it and throw it in the back of my mind and think about it for a week or two, and then I'm ready to start actually doing something. You need to keep your class project simple. Don't try to replicate Amazon. They have a wonderful website, but they've got thousands of people working on that website. This is a 3-hour course, so grasp something of the appropriate size. The point of this class is to master the concepts of data-driven websites, not to duplicate Amazon. So develop a goal, break it up into manageable steps that add value. So you may decide that you in fact want to have an Amazon site, but be aware of any big project, including computers, that is a big bang. Oh, we're going to work for 5 years and then we're going to turn it on and it's going to be marvelous. Well, what you'll find out is that the world moves in 5 years, and so you need to have an end goal that you're trying to get to, but then figure out stepping stones that you can use. If you find those good stepping stones, they'll deliver value that'll cover the cost of later phases. And the early phases test the concept and avoid the big bang project that never gets turned on. And there have been a lot of those. Okay, so that's the end of this lecture. If you have questions, I hope that you will email me at cmarshall0050@kctcs.edu or call me during office hours. Thank you for your time.